Before we begin, I'd just like to know for any sensitive superstars who might be watching, yes, you, the one with the lawsuits, this video is protected under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, aka Fair Use. This means this content is made solely for commentary, criticism, analysis, parody, and discussion of public figures and publicly available material. I am not claiming ownership of any clips, images, or any of the sort shown. I do own the music playing in the background. I produced it. Other than that, they are only used in service of my commentary. So if a certain crybaby who thinks suing small, mostly black streamers while ignoring the white ones is a solid look for your brand, yeah, this ain't that. This is commentary, baby. Parody, protected speech. It's all for the jokes. You know, the stuff you can't silence just because it hurt your feelings. If you still feel like suing, well, then you're proving everyone's point. And there's a greater point that I'm going to get to in the show. Welcome.
The Mask. Who Drake actually is. Now, before I go any further, I need to make sure we're all on the same page about who we're actually talking about when we talk about Drake, because a lot of people in this discourse are still operating off of the idea of Drake, the 2009 to 2015 version, which, all the fuckery aside, that is by far, hands down, my favorite iteration of Drake musically from 2009 to 2015. I mentioned in every Midnight Music video where I cover him. I was a fan. So Far Gone, I love that mixtape. I enjoyed Take Care, even though half of it was the weekends. Okay? I'm a fan, okay? I am at least objective enough to be like, he knows how to make slappers, bro. There's no denying that. But again, like I always say, my favorite iteration of Drake is from 2019 to 2015. Woo! Chef's kiss. All right? So the idea of Drake, the sensitive Toronto kid with the melodies and the feelings and the look. Like I always say, I'll be honest with you, that version, him and his writers, truly a chef's kiss. That was a beautiful time, musically, for him. But that's not who we're dealing with anymore. And truthfully, looking back, the signs were always there. They were always there. This is a man who sat at the dinner table with his Degrassi castmates on camera and mocked Toronto street slang, calling it ignorant, laughed at it.
The guys at our school, instead of addressing people like the group, like saying like, what are you guys doing? Say mans like you. It's really weird. Yeah, so mans like you are going to that, and then just means like the group.
Crew.
That's interesting.
It's not, it's really ignorant.
And then turned around and built his entire brand, his entire tough guy persona. Tough, right? His entire cultural identities, however multiple versions of them they were, on the exact same thing that he laughed at, on the exact same thing that he mocked. He saw a gold mine in blackness, in street credibility, in associating himself with the bad man them from the city, okay? The J. Prim's mob ties, the Memphis hoods. You know, he saw what it was worth commercially and he put it on like a costume, the same way he put on that blackface on the cover of The Story of Adidon via the Cruel and Unusual Pusha T. Shout out to Cazavelli. Excellent video. He puts out excellent material. Shout out to him. The Very Dangerous Pusha T made that very clear, okay? Like I said in my last video, Amos and Andy, he's that. He's the personification of that. He's the evolution of that. He's the evolution of the minstrel shows. That's him, the white guys who put on blackface, but the fucked up thing is that he's black. Very black, right? Like, it's truly insane. And that's not culture to him. Like I said, that's a minstrel show. And I mean that in the most historically precise way possible. Because a minstrel show isn't just a white guy putting on blackface. It's the performance of blackness as a caricature for profit entertainment, divorced from actual humanity, struggle, and depth of the people being imitated. And the truly wild part, as I said before, I have to emphasize this. Drake is a black man, a biracial black man, yes, but he is a black man nonetheless. By every standard that this country has ever applied to race, he is a black man. He's beyond the 8th drop rule, okay? Beyond that. Which makes what he does not just culturally dishonest, but something closer to self-betrayal, maybe? I don't know. Yeah. He mocks the thing he profits from. He weaponizes the thing he doesn't understand. He performs an identity he never actually lived. And here's the root of it. And I want to be careful because this isn't about attacking his biracial identity. That was never the point. Ever, Michael Eric Dyson. That never was the point, bruh. Or any of the stands who don't use critical thinking and analysis to kind of like, you know, put two and two together. You know, they like conflating things and gaslighting and lying and stuff. So I want to be careful here. Again, because I'm not attacking his biracial identity. That's not the point, and it was never Kendrick's point either. But Drake was not raised around black folks. You could see it. He was raised by his white Jewish mother. He didn't have any power over that. I'm not gonna hold that against him in the sense that he should have like found a black family to live with. He's a kid. He didn't have any power over that part, right? But there's a particular kind of cultural formation, a particular lens through which you learn to see the world and your place in it. And that comes specifically from being raised in the community, okay? From having elders who check you, from absorbing the unspoken codes, right? From understanding in your bones, not just in your head, what it has cost for us to be here. It's not something you can download. You either grew up with it or you didn't. And Drake didn't, okay? You don't have to live in a hood to know that either. If you were raised around solid folks who help you guide your path through your understanding and help you view the world through a proper lens to be able to take care of yourself in this two-tier justice system as best as you can, you don't have to be from the hood. You don't, because as I said in my last video, black people in suburbia deal with a litany of racial aggressions, microaggressions, undertones, over policing, problems all of in its own, okay? If you are a black person in America, it doesn't matter where you live, and you've been here for a long time. Regardless of your political alignments or your philosophies, there's a part of you deep down inside that understands, and you get it. And if you do get it, that's how you know that others who don't, not like us. Plain and simple. But let's circle back for a second, because you see everything most clearly in the one move that revealed everything for Drake, that shows that he's not like us. The lawsuit. This is one of the biggest drivers for me for having done this video, because to this day, I can't believe the amount of sucker shit that it took for a gentleman to get his ass beat so bad in a battle that he had to sue. Someone as financially powerful as Drake, as successful as Drake, felt it so necessary that he needed to go to the law after losing a battle. We know the history about the subliminals happening since the Control verse, and he provoked the battle, and then he's gonna sue. He lost the battle. He got eviscerated, historically, surgically, publicly, and instead of doing what any man raised with even a peripheral understanding of our culture would know to do, sit down, be quiet, come back stronger, he went to the law. He called the lawyers against a rap battle. I cannot stress enough what that means culturally, because black people in America have a relationship with the justice system that is written in blood and pain and generations of trauma. You don't run to the courts because you lost a rap battle. You just don't. If you knew anything about what that system has done and continues to do to our people, if you had absorbed even a fraction of that history, that option would never occur to you. The fact that it not only occurred to him, but that he actually did it, tells you everything you need to know about the depth of his cultural understanding. He went where he felt comfortable, like I said in the last video. And that's the whole story. Which is also why, when he chose to give interviews, who he chose to give interviews to after the battle, he didn't go to hip hop media. He went to Bobby Altoff, XQC, Aiden Ross, and a lot of other people in hip hop media were like, well, why isn't he coming over here? And like I said last time, he doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't respect the space enough. And at that point, his ego was too shattered. He didn't go to those spaces because he went where he philosophically aligns. He went to the incel adjacent, red pill adjacent, MAGA light echo chambers where nobody challenges you. Like I said in my last video, okay? Nobody asks you the hard questions, and the audience will accept any narrative you give them as long as you're the main character. Kendrick told you he's not like us, and he keeps showing you why. So when we talk about the men who publicly defend Drake, who went to bat for him, who minimized Kendrick, who made excuses, understand what they were actually defending. They weren't defending an artist. They weren't defending hip hop. They were defending a corporate entity dressed up in either his barrettes or sometimes his grill, or, you know, all of the... That's who they stood for, okay? A minstrel in a hoodie. A man who used the culture as a ladder and then pulled it up behind him. And that's what makes their defense kind of like baffling, sort of unforgivable, maybe. Other people will sit there and tell you, nah, Drake really want to be looking out for people and da. Listen, I don't know that man personally. I'm only going off of what I see. Maybe he does look out for certain people, but the vast majority of his actions show otherwise. Show that he's more for self than he is for other people. Don't know what to tell you. So now I want to get into the forced indictment of Kendrick by stans and Drake supporters and the like, and why it's telling. I really need y'all to pay attention though, because this is the part that genuinely still mystifies me, but sort of not. I spent a lot of time trying to make sense of this. It's one thing to defend Drake, I guess. Everybody has a right to the person that they want to like and support, I guess, at the end. Sometimes it's just not that deep. Even after all the analysis that I just put forward, some of these guys probably just feel like they like him as a person more. I don't know. That's very well within the realm of possibility. Okay? We just spent the last however long establishing why that happens and what drives it, what could drive it. But it's a whole separate thing to also simultaneously go out of your way to diminish Kendrick. And that's what a significant number of these guys did. Those are two different choices, and the second one is far more revealing than the first. I'm not saying you have to fall in line and like dude. You don't have to. You have a right to like whoever you want, period. But still, I just found, again, my whole thing is, I see a through line with these gentlemen. Age bracket, region to a certain degree, or disposition that they showed us in the public, how they act. And I'm like, there's a through line for multiple different reasons, but there's through lines here. Think about what you have to be willing to ignore in order to dismiss Kendrick. You have to take a look at the Pulitzer Prize, the first ever awarded to a non-classical, non-jazz musician, and say, so what? You have to look at To Pimp a Butterfly, look at Damn, look at GNX, an album where all 12 tracks charted in the Billboard 100 Top 30, with 7 in the top 10, and Kendrick becoming the first male solo artist to have 3 #1 debuts in a single year. You have to look at the Super Bowl performance that drew a record 133.5 million viewers, the highest in halftime show history.
But amazingly enough, somehow y'all will find a way to sit here with unmitigated gall and audacity and say, Kendrick don't have hits though. He don't have hits. You don't hear him in the club. He ain't got hits, nigga. He ain't got hits. Okay, sure. If that's what you think, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Look at Not Like Us, holding the #1 spot for 21 weeks. Look at all of that. And somehow conclude that this man is not at least worthy of your respect, not even worthy of your acknowledgement. Now ask yourself, what does it actually take to arrive at that conclusion? Because it doesn't seem rational to me, okay? It's not even really about taste. I mean, you might not personally vibe with conscious rap, and that's valid, or his style of music, and that's valid. Everyone has their lane, and that's perfectly fine. But to actively campaign against an artist of that caliber, when it's just undeniable at this point, that's not a preference, that's a posture. And postures always come from somewhere, and here's where I think it comes from. So Kendrick winning the way he won is deeply uncomfortable for these men in a way that goes beyond rap beef allegiances. Because Kendrick, from what I was able to interpret, what I was able to observe, he demonstrated throughout his entire career arc, then explosively in 2024, is that you can operate at the highest commercial level of the industry for the most part without compromising the core of what you are as a person, as an artist, and what hip-hop means to you and how you convey that. Without ghostwriters, without corporate puppeteering, okay, not saying corporate support, I'm sure he had that, clearly, even with TDE, but I'm talking about corporate puppeteering, without selling proximity to power for relevance. For the most part, from what we see on the outside looking in, he mostly did it on his terms, rooted in his community, rooted in Compton, rooted in Black consciousness. And the culture responded in a way that was utterly undeniable, like I said earlier. And for guys who spent decades making the compromises the industry demanded, men who learned that survival meant staying close to power, okay, who played the game because they believed that was the only way, Kendrick's win is not just inspiring, it's also quietly indicting. It proves that compromise was never actually necessary. It proves that there was another way. And nobody wants to reckon with the possibility that the lines they crossed, the people they stayed quiet about, the things they gave up, none of that was required. They're looking at all that in the end and saying, damn, you mean I did all that fuck shit for nothing? I could have just stayed true? They gotta feel a certain way. I get it. So it's easier to dismiss Kendrick than to sit with that, than to face that reality. I'm not saying that is the case for every one of these guys that I mentioned. I'm trying to be clear here. I'm not saying that's the case for every one of these guys. But I'm sure it broached within proximity of something that they thought about. Some of them, it had to have. So when Jim Jones goes on record saying,
"The genre feels empty without Drake,"
that Drake delivers a vibe Kendrick simply can't replicate.
And when Jim Jones said that, I was genuinely stunned. I was stunned because I'm like, you know that he continued putting out songs after the battle, right? You know that he did a whole entire collaborative album, which, if we speak on it candidly, the presence on the album was primarily dominated by Drake. Party was just kind of an afterthought. He was the Robin to the Batman. He was the accent piece to the main course. But then you also have all the records that he released via 100 gigs. Some of the other freestyles, like, you know, the Fighting Irish freestyle, and, you know, Wagwan Delilah. But the point is, Drake has not stopped releasing music since the end of the beef. He has not gone anywhere. You're complaining about him not being present and a vibe missing. Have you been listening? He's been here the whole time. He's just not producing the vibe, Jim. He's not producing the vibe. And this is the paradoxical bullshit that I don't understand with these stands. It's this ridiculous narrative that these people get on. Oh, the game needs Drake. Bagfield did something like that too. Some other guys in that sphere said that the game is boring. He never left. Go listen to him if you're bored then. Go listen to him. So it's just something for them to hold on to. Any kind of straws they can grasp at to disparage Kendrick.
I hear a man protecting himself from a mirror. When Michael Eric Dyson, a man who built his entire reputation on the intersectionality of black intellectual thought and hip-hop culture, willfully misreads the thesis of Not Like Us and frames it as an attack on Drake's biracial identity, I see a man who knows exactly what he's doing and chooses to do it anyway. That's a decision. And then, you know, we have examples like Fat Joe, who actually course corrected, eventually gave Kendrick his flowers, acknowledged what he did for LA, and showed that accountability is possible even after you've been, you know, on the other side of things. I can respect that. But before the correction, he was out here suggesting the beat was already over before Not Like Us dropped. Premature dismissal when the culture needed honest voices, most importantly. But the Joe and Jada podcast is another subject that we'll get into at another point. You know, even after the course correction, when he was asked about Drake's forthcoming album, you know, he kind of couldn't help himself still. He reaches for the most politically safe, most glazed over answer he can find. In a comment section of the video notice. That's just one thing. That's an aside. Okay? Regular people in time watch that and call that out, which tells you how transparent that kind of difference has become. And then there's 50. I touched on his actions a few episodes ago, and for a while I didn't understand why he would support Drake. But as I studied, it made a lot more sense, right? His support of Drake was fascinating to me for a little bit. And it's not because it's simple loyalty, but because of what it actually reveals. He told Drake privately that, quote, losing the beef didn't matter because of his tour numbers. Okay. Look at the GNX tour selling out stadiums across the world. Did Drake still win? arenas, stadiums. He said publicly that he didn't see Drake do anything whack at any point. That's rich. And honestly, considering the most recent up-to-date events between him and T.I., I could see why he says that. If we're studying or psychoanalyzing 50 himself, he would say something like that. And then he framed Drake's lawsuit as reminiscent of his own battles with Jimmy Iovine and Interscope. He sees his own trajectory in Drake's situation. The commercial peak, the cultural decline, the industry turning its back. He's not defending Drake on principle, okay? He's projecting himself onto Drake.
You know, there's also another hidden layer irony about 50, and something that I actually really realized. 50 and Drake are way more alike than they are different. If you subtract the upbringings and their childhoods, right? If you subtract that, but you just look solely at how they act in public, how they act in opposition to their enemies, their perceived enemies, and the lengths and the extents that they will go to either humiliate, overtake, or dominate said enemies. They are very much alike, more so than they are different. Even down to the little things like memeing to death and, you know, thinking everything is a fucking joke and everything's funny and they're so cool and they're so unbothered. No matter how crazy they look, how corny they look, how ridiculous they look, they are the masters of doubling and tripling down. And we see it play out in real time. The lawsuit here, and then recent events with 50 and all the people that he's beefing with. Everybody from Mano, Fab, you know, Papoose, to T.I. and the Harris family, to anybody that isn't this, that color. Yeah, we gotta mention that too. I hope y'all ain't think that anybody can get it with 50. No, not these folks. No offense to y'all, but it's the truth.
And the irony, the deep, almost poetic irony, is that 50 has spent decades navigating a complicated relationship with the codes and the values of the culture he built his identity on. Whether you give those stories credence or not is your business, right? But what I'll say is this: for that guy with that history to publicly champion someone who went to the law because he lost a rap battle, the irony screams. Okay, the irony is just like glaring. Okay, now all of those cases are significant. All of them deserve the scrutiny that we just gave them. But I've saved the most quintessential example for last in this section, because this is almost a category in of itself. Maul of the Rory and Maul podcast. You want to talk about King Glazer? That guy. I want to give this the space it deserves, because if you want one single case study that captures everything that we've been talking about, the generational betrayal, the inexplicable allegiances, the complete abandonment of cultural responsibility, this is it. At least in my view. So let me give you some context first. I've been a listener of the Joe Budden podcast for a long time, and I was listening before Maul came on. And when he did come on, there was an interesting energy about him that kind of felt different, and not different in a pretty not in a bad way at the time. His relentlessly unbothered disposition, where he was like too cool for everything and nothing rattled him for a while. It was funny, it became like a running joke, right? Because of how he was so cool that everything else was corny in his purview, right? But if you pay attention long enough, you start to see what's underneath that cool of his, right? And what's underneath, it's always been a worldview that was definitely leaning red pill adjacent, incel adjacent, long before that even had a name in the online cultural zeitgeist. That kind of disposition that looks like freedom, but is actually just a different kind of rigidity, an allergy to accountability dressed up as confidence. Maul's case, it makes Maul's case uniquely significant. It's very interesting to observe because his brother is Kareem Biggs Burke, one of the 3 founding members of the legendary Rockefeller Records, alongside Dame Dash, of course, and Hove, Jay-Z. one of the most consequential independent labels in the history of hip-hop, especially in the 90s. It was the label that proved that Black artistic ownership could exist at the highest commercial level. You know, this label obviously gave us Reasonable Doubt, gave us The Blueprint, gave us all these incredible Jay-Z albums. Mal has another brother in industry as well, hip-hop since 1978. I think that's the name he goes by. Correct me in the comment section, guys. I was researching a lot of things at a lot of different points, so, you know, everything didn't get all the scrutiny, but I did my best. So correct me in the comment section. But his brother, Hip Hop, well connected and respected in the culture. Mal grew up inside hip hop, even though he isn't an artist. He had a first person view of something incredible by blood, by lineage, by proximity to the people who built Rockefeller with their bare hands. He had an inside view. How amazing that must have been. And with all of that behind him, all of that inherited understanding of what this culture is supposed to stand for, what it costs, what it's for, he became Drake's most enthusiastic, most embarrassing public defender during the most lopsided cultural verdict in recent hip-hop memory. Him and DJ Academics. Academics also deserves his own category, but no. So, no, just no. So I want to be precise here, because we're not talking about subtle fence straddling. We're not talking about the kind of diplomatic both sidesing we saw from, you know, other names on the list. We're talking about a level of commitment to the wrong side, so thorough, so willfully blind to the overwhelming evidence in front of him that even his co-host Rory couldn't always maintain a straight face, even though Rory tried to both side shit and be the ultimate fence sitter. He was trying to play that game too. He knew what he was doing. Still to this day, he playing games. We see it. The fact that his own partner, the person sitting next to him who knows him pretty damn well, I'd say, who has every reason to let things slide for the sake of the show, and he did let a lot slide, was also at the same time checking him at certain points on air and being like, I don't know, buddy. It tells you everything about how far gone it got. And we all saw the clips. So while the beef was actively unfolding, while Kendrick was surgically dismantling Drake track by track in real time, while Not Like Us was rewriting records, and Meet the Grams was being discussed as one of the most vicious character assassinations in the genre's history, Mal was on air declaring, quote, Drake was the most lit rapper in the game during all of that, end quote. Listen, that is a man who checked out of his job description entirely. Now, you know, we don't expect these podcasts to be 100%. We got to take what they say with a grain of salt. So that goes without saying. But still, when the shit is right there in front of your face and it's so obvious, really? Then he went on record calling Family Matters, which is Drake's response, for those of you who don't know, the uninitiated, the one that was buried within hours by Kendrick's reply, the one that the entire internet had already adjudicated as the losing entry. He called that the best record of the beef. The best record of the entire beef. Take a moment with that. Then he went further. He went after Kendrick personally, repeating the unverified allegations from Drake's diss tracks as though they were documented fact.
And I think it's really, really funny and rich that they somehow seem to omit the egregious accusations that Drake was making towards Kendrick. It's only Kendrick's that are the ones that have been hurting the other party, but not the other way around, even though they're both throwing barbs at each other. That's why the judge dismissed the damn case in the first place. Gilly, Rory, Mal, everyone in your camp or any one of your like sort and ilk. What are you?
He contested Good Kid, Mad City's placement on Apple Music's greatest list. He found grievances with Kendrick's legacy at every available opportunity and continues to do so, while simultaneously finding justifications for every single one of Drake's documented, receipted, publicly verifiable failures of a character. Will go to bat, will twist himself into a pretzel to justify anything that Drake does. Drake can do no wrong in his eyes.
About how he said all of you niggas, including nigga he's in a beef with. Don't make me sit here and look like I'm dick riding. Don't make me sit here and look like I'm dick riding. Don't make me sit here and look like I'm dick riding.
He can do no wrong in his eyes? Really? He did all this while openly admitting on air to his own audience that Drake is his personal friend. Seems like you carry his water more than you're his personal friend, but I don't know y'all, so maybe you are his personal friend. So he announced his conflict of interest and kept going anyway. So here's what I keep coming back to. Mal is from the same generation as everyone else on this list that I've mentioned. He came up in the same era. He has a more direct connection to the foundational history of this culture, in a way, than almost anyone we've discussed, by blood, by family, by everything. And yet, he became the case study, him and academics, the example that will be pointed to for years when people want to illustrate what it looks like, when personal loyalty completely overrides cultural responsibility, when the unbothered cool guy persona gets stress tested by something that actually matters and collapses. Because here's the thing about being too cool for everything, right? It works fine when the stakes are low, right? But when something real is on the line, when the culture is actually being adjudicated, when the verdict actually matters, you have to show up as something more than cool. You got to show up as honest. You got to keep it a stack. Mal has the lineage. He had the platform. He had the credibility at one point, and he spent it, all of it, on one beef. Completely delegitimized anything else that comes out of his mouth. For a friend who, based on every piece of evidence available to the public, would not have done the same for him. I cannot see Drake going to bat for Mal in the same way that Mal goes to bat for Drake. So now let me address the actual arguments that these guys make against Kendrick directly, because they need to be dismantled on their merits too, not just psychologically, if that makes sense. The "we don't play Kendrick in the club" argument, which is really fucking stupid, by the way. Go to any club and any DJ worth their weight in gold, say that with a straight face.
I'm at the pool party. BBL Drizzy, I'm at the pool party, and they just called.
But even if we entertain it, since when was club play the measuring stick for greatness in hip hop? There's a lot of guys, a lot of the big dogs who aren't club rappers per se. Sure, there's some. That standard has never been applied consistently across the board for every artist. And it's only being applied to Kendrick because these guys need something to hold on to hang their dismissal on. So they grab the most surface level critique available and run with it. That's what they do. Pulitzer Prize dismissal. Listen, I understand the instinct to be skeptical of white institutional validation, like, same thing with the Grammys and all that stuff. I'm all about always critiquing and questioning power structures. You have to. It keeps the power structures on their toes, and it forces them to take into account the people that need to fight for their civil liberties at every step of the way. When we question them, we let them know that we see them. Right? So I understand the idea behind being skeptical of white institutional validation. That's a real legitimate conversation, for sure. But that's not what these men are engaging in. They're not offering a nuanced critique of institutional gatekeeping at all in the slightest. It's like this half-brained shit that they're doing. They're using like anti-elitism as a shield because they can't mount a substantive argument against the work itself. There's a difference between I'm skeptical of what the Pulitzer Prize represents, right? And the Pulitzer Prize doesn't matter. The latter is just cope dressed up as street cred. And then the one I have to come back to every time, Drake's line, rapping like you're trying to get the slaves free, directed at Kendrick, mocking Kendrick for being too black, too conscious, too deeply rooted in the actual lived history of his people. And these men, black men who've come from the communities that we spent all that time talking about, who came up on music that existed because of that history. They didn't call it out. Think about that. Some nodded along and were like, yeah, that's funny, that's dope, I like that. That affirmation is the loudest thing any of them ever said or did. Because here's what that line actually was. It was Drake confirming everything Kendrick said that Drake was. Ta-da. As a man who doesn't understand, respect, or feel connected to the deeper currents of where this culture came from. As he was openly mocking the mere idea, quote unquote, that music should carry the weight of Black liberation. As if that wasn't one of the sentiments which birthed it. Of course, there are other sentiments that push the genre forward. The need, the want and the desire to party and have a good time. That's always been an element of hip hop ever since its inception in the 70s, on the tail end of the disco era. But part of that was, again, that Drake was openly mocking the idea. That line right there said it all. Rapping like you're trying to get the slaves free. That's mocking the idea that music should carry the weight of Black liberation. And the people who really should have been the first to say like, all right, Drake, you bugging. Nah, son. These same guys, these same group of people who were around the elements, around during the times of Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, and all these other incredible, really revolutionary and innovative artists of the time, they understood in their bones why that music existed, and the fact that in spite of all that, those guys remain quiet. And you know what's bad when even the court of law, the very same court of law in general, the institution that is fraught with a very bloody history between them and the injustices done to our people, even the court in particular, that eventually dismissed Drake's lawsuit, thankfully so, understood the assignment better than those guys did, ruling that the beef was a war of words, where both parties hurled incendiary accusations, and that no reasonable listener would take Drake's claims as verified fact. The courts recognized that. The courts told him, man, go sit down. What are you talking about? The culture told him, go sit down. Fuck out of here. And these guys, the malls and academics and all that stuff for the world. Academics is younger than the generation I'm speaking of. But the malls in the 50s and autumns, they just glossed over the fact that this dude sued for a rap battle that he lost. What? Inconceivable during their heyday. Now it's okay. They're still standing in his corner. That silence, that support is the indictment, not of Kendrick, of them.